What's up guys, Shawnthebro here, and today we're going to be going over super meter, combo gauge, whatever you want to call this thing. The bar at the bottom that basically allows you to do special attacks, super moves, whatever. In today's episode specifically, we're just going to be setting up the super meter, as well as learning how to add points to it and deduct points from it. We will be getting into doing light attacks, or special attacks. I'm calling them X attacks. You know, they're called 800 different things depending on the game, but I'm going to be calling them exceptional attacks in this game. So our exceptional attacks can be done by pressing a button along with the actual move you want to input, right? So what I mean by this is if I hit our opponent, then you can see I gain some points toward my super meter. My opponent gains some points toward their super meter, because you get points for dealing damage and taking damage. Usually less points for dealing damage. It does depend on the game, and you can configure this however you want, but you can see I can beat this guy up pretty bad, and then he can beat me up back a little bit. And then both player 1 and player 2 will be able to use these exceptional attacks, which right now are the same attacks. We will get into changing those attacks probably next episode, but for now, take a look at the bars and you'll see I can use an attack and it'll waste some of the bar. We're actually going to make that so that will basically do your exceptional attack, and then those attacks can do more damage and things like that. So for this guy, if I press, for me it's 3 on the keyboard and then the attack I want to use, you can see I use some of my super meter. So we're going to chunk it out so you can kind of see the lines and see where exactly you have to be at to be able to use certain moves, but for now you can just see that it decreases when I press these inputs. Same with this guy, if I can remember his inputs, I think. Nope, maybe I don't remember his inputs, actually. But either way, he also has a super meter that you can use, so this will work for player 1 and player 2. If we go into, let's start with just the controls as usual. If you're a longtime fan of the series, you'll know what I'm about to do in the project settings, but if not, if this is your first episode, or if you want to catch up on everything we've done in the series, this is episode like 29 or something. We're quite far in, so feel free to catch up. I'll put an iCard right here you can click on to go back to the first episode in the series. Otherwise, let's get started. So go to Edit, Project Settings, Input, and then determine your attacks, 3 and 4. Okay. So these attacks are, these buttons are the buttons I have to use alongside the attack I want to do to implement, or to perform the exceptional attack, right? So if you're familiar with Killer Instinct, this is like a shadow move, how you have to press a button and then enter your input, and then the shadow move basically does the exact same move. Well, it does the same move with some variation, but then also does more damage. It's essentially that. It's that kind of behavior here. So 3 and 4 on my keyboard will perform the functionality as long as I press another button. So for example, I have to press 3 and let's get a better attack here. I think it's G. Let's do player 1's attacks. G. Yep, here we go. So if I press G and 3 at the same time, that's how I do my exceptional attack. I'm making a point to, I'm trying to point this out so that we can make it clear what's going on here. Basically, you press these 2 inputs, or whatever. This could end up being like a quarter circle forward, and then you press this button. But the point is, we're going to do 2 checks here. So once you've set them up, and if you need to set them up, go to your action mappings here and just hit plus. It'll make a new one. Type in whatever you want, and then go to your drop down here and find whatever. Like I put 3, so there you go. Okay, you can close out of this now, and we're going to go into our code. Normally, I would start with the header file, but let's go ahead and set this part up since we just added the new inputs. So at the very bottom for both player 1 and player 2, I put in functionality to use exceptional attack P1, exceptional attack P2. So these are my 2 different controllers in case I have like 2 separate input devices. Since we're just using keyboard, we only need to worry about this one for now. We don't need to worry about the other one. But go ahead and copy one of your other bind actions. You can use your attack if you want, or write it out, either way. But in your setup player input component function, in your template character, or your base character, go ahead and add the command from the project settings that we just added, exceptional attack P1. Just to reiterate, in the input section, it's looking for this name. Okay, it looks for this name. Once this is pressed, we do IE press, not released, then we call this function. Now, we haven't written this function yet. We're going to do that right now, but you can feel free to write this out first. I'm going to close the project settings. There we go. Okay, now that you have this set up, and again, feel free to do it for player 2 as well. I've set it up for player 2. You are good to go there. Let's go to the header file, and let's add a few more variables and a function. So we want to add a start exceptional attack function. I'm going to set this up essentially the exact same way we did our start attack 1, 2, 3, and 4 in the other episodes. You can call them supers or whatever. I was avoiding the term super because I'm going to have an actual like super ultimate attack. You know, one of those really fancy ones where the camera has to pan over and all that. So for me, these are exceptional attacks. Make this function, and then scroll down, and where you're making your variables, go ahead and make variables for your X attacks. You know how we use was light attack used, medium, heavy, all that? I've switched was special attack used to was super used because I don't think we need 4 different attacks and then a super for the purposes of this tutorial. Feel free to add as many as you'd like, but you don't need to press that many buttons. I mean, again, to reference Killer Instinct, there's light, medium, and heavies, and then you just use different inputs to access different moves. So I think three moves are good here, and then the super is separate. But we do want these X attack, these exceptional attack booleans. For the record, you could use one was exceptional attack used, and then do an if check to check if the attack was a light, medium, or heavy to accomplish the same functionality instead of having booleans for all of these. However, it's only 3. I'm only doing 3 in this tutorial, so I don't think it's a big deal. I just want to make you aware of it, that you could do that if you don't like making a lot of variables or think it's messy. Okay, and there's one other thing we need in here. I almost forgot before I went to the next page. So we need to add a float variable called supermeter. I called it supermeter amount. You can call it whatever you'd like, but this is essentially just the variable that's going to store how much supermeter we have. It's a ratio just like our health, so it'll go from 0 to 1. That way we know how much we have, how much we can use, things like that. This will be especially helpful when we chunk it out and we know, we can display the progress bar in 3 different sections or however many we have. Make a float, make sure it's blueprint read write because we're going to bind it in the HUD. Alright. Now when you go to your C++ class, go ahead and go to your constructor and make sure you set your variables to false by default. Your booleans. I remember, was super used as was special used, so it's not a new variable, I just renamed it. And then make sure you set your supermeter amount to start off with 0. As long as you want them to start with 0, maybe you want them to start with half or whatever, that's fine. Just set the appropriate value here. Remember, this is a ratio, so it's 0 to 1. 1 being 100%, 0 being 0%. So if you wanted 50, like 50% full, it would look like that. Scroll down, and we're going to write that function now, the start exceptional attack function that we made in our header file. I got some logs here that I'm not using. I was using to show that you can write these in here if you want to test them, but you don't need them, so feel free to leave out the green lines if you're not interested. They're just good for debugging. In our start exceptional attack function, what we're going to do is actually just check if it was a light, medium, or heavy attack used, and then I determine the attack that we want to use, the X attack we want to use, the exceptional attack we want to use. So if we press the button, the way this works is if we press this button that we set up here, start exceptional attack. The button bound to exceptional attack 1 right now is 3 on my keyboard. So when I press 3, we call this function. Then we look to see, was light attack, medium attack, or heavy attack used? If it was used, then we want to do these X attacks. If it wasn't, we don't do anything. So you can press 3 all you want, and it won't use your meter or anything. but it just won't do anything since we need to combine it with another button, another input. So if it was a light attack, was light X attack used is true, or was medium true, was heavy true, depending on the attack we used when we pressed the 3 key. Then you can go ahead and subtract from your super meter amount here. These are arbitrary values. Feel free to come up with an algorithm or some sort of equation that determines how much they should lose. I think a lot of it is just kind of trial and error to see what seems fair, what's punishable, things like this. So I just made the light attack does the least amount of super, or uses the least amount of super meter, medium does the middle, and heavy does the most. Last thing here, I just make sure if super meter is less than 0, super meter equals 0. This is always just a safety check. Technically, since it's a ratio, it shouldn't really come into play, but because you can go below 0, you can get some weird results and technically lose some of your data with round-off error, which could be bad, especially something as technical as a fighting game where everything counts. So if it goes lower than 0, just make sure it resets to 0. Now we have to make sure we add points to our super meter. Since we're starting at 0, we need some way to gain them. Well, we gain them when we deal damage and when we take damage, but we're going to actually do all this in the take damage function. The good thing about the take damage function is if one player is taking damage, we know the other player is going to be the one hitting them. But go down to your take damage function. We can check once we've been hit and we are not in the blocking state. Once we're taking damage and not blocking, we're taking full damage here. This is just your standard, I was hit, I'm taking damage state, right? Once that happens, we can go ahead and do this logic. You can feel free to do this however you want. I made a kind of formula here that is not formal at all. Just I looked at it, I was like, yeah, that sounds pretty good. So put whatever numbers, whatever values you want here. But the important part is, if we're taking damage, we want to make sure we're gaining super meter when we should be gaining it. So super meter plus equals, I did damage amount times 0.85. Just a random, this way it'll scale with your damage. So the more damage you take, the more super meter you get. We also want to add to the other players, the enemies, super meter, because he has dealt damage. However, since he's the one dealing damage, we're going to add less than the one taking damage. So where we check if other player exists down here, you can go ahead and do some logic here to determine how much super meter they get. You don't need to necessarily do it the way I'm doing it, but I'll show you what my thought process was here. So first and foremost is actually this line. We'll skip the if right here for now, and we'll talk about this. So what I'm doing is other player super meter amount plus equals damage amount times 0.3. So they're getting a lot less super meter per hit than you are for taking damage. This thing I'm doing above, if other player was light attack used, not, then we want to apply it. You don't have to do this. I'm not even sure if this is the standard to do it, but I wanted to show it in case this functionality is wanted. Basically, you can do this for any of your booleans, but what we're checking for here is as long as they weren't using an X attack here, then give them super meter. I don't know if you want to give them super meter when they're using an exceptional attack, because basically you use an exceptional attack, it does more damage, and then you get more super meter from it. I don't think that's usually the case. I think usually the progress for super meters locks until the attacks are done, until the gauge has been used or the attack has been used. Feel free to implement this or not, doesn't matter. But long story short, this is checking to make sure we are not using an exceptional attack to gain more super meter. So as long as we're not using an exceptional attack, we'll be okay to gain super meter. Okay? And that is all we'll need to add for now. You can see everything else is the same. So we're good for the code, excuse me, but we need to add two things in Unreal. So the first thing we need to add is in our AnimBP. Again, we're not going to be going over moves today, so it's going to be the same animation, but we do have to set some variables in our AnimBP when we're done, and I don't have it open for some reason, but we want to go to our character HUD as well. Now, this was the old stamina bar. I've just moved it down and renamed it to Super Meter and Super Meter 2. Feel free to call it whatever you want, or keep your stamina bar and add a new progress bar, but this is literally progress bar just brought onto the screen like that. Make sure your binding, your percent is 0 if you want it to be empty. You can also make this 1 if you want to see it, what color it is and what it looks like when it's full, all that stuff. We'll leave 1 like that, just so we can kind of see both ways, but there you go. Once you've brought your progress bar in to where you want it to be, go ahead and click on it and hit bind. Now, I've already done it for both of these, but we're doing basically the same binding as the health bar. So once you've clicked on your progress bar, go to the details panel, scroll down to progress, and look at percent, and then hit bind and create new binding. Okay? And just to be extremely clear, this is what it looks like if you haven't bound anything through that progress bar. Okay, so the progress bar, we can now click on it, our super meter, go to our binding. When you make the binding, it'll bring you here, but if not, just go into your graph. You'll be able to see your functions right here. And remember, our health bar percent look like this. You can actually copy this entirely. We are going to make a change here, of course, and use the super meter amount instead of player health, but feel free to copy this entirely. Once you've copied it, it'll look like this. So you'll get your game mode, cast to your default game mode, so we know we can get our player references because we have player 1 and player 2 references in our game mode. We make sure that the player 1 is valid, and then if it is, we get their super meter amount and return that. So since the super meter amount is a ratio, it will be properly displayed within the progress bar. You will be good to go. And then in player 2, you do the same thing. So the second progress bar, you do the same thing, except you grab player 2 from the game mode and make sure it is valid. Now, if we go to our mutant and BP, I've made a new function which essentially just does the same things we've already been doing. So don't worry about this too much. I'll show you what it does, but you don't have to do this just to make it neater. I made a function called reset variables. So if you go to your functions, hit plus function, it'll bring you in here, call it whatever you want. What I'm doing is all the variables we have to reset, because we do have quite a bit now. Light, medium, heavy, super, light X, medium X, and heavy X. Basically, when we're done an attack, I want to reset all the states. I don't want any of these to be true. Even if these just represent inputs, they shouldn't be true when the attack is finished. We want to make sure we reset them. That way, if you press an attack, like in the middle of another attack, you don't automatically go to it when the animation is done, assuming you can't cancel or combo into it. That's a mouthful, but my point is you want to make sure you separate your inputs between attacks. That way you can't just spam an input command list and then they do those attacks in order if they're not intended to combo. So we were already resetting the 4 of these, and again, was super used, was special used, but I've also added these 3 new ones now. I just wanted to add it into a function to make it neater. But do make sure that where we were resetting them, which is at the end of an attack, the start of the attack transition, end of attack transition, or end jump transition is where I've been doing it. That these variables go back to default. And then it connects to the for loop to clean out any of the hitboxes as well. Again, this already existed. Just make sure you add the new X variables. Okay, so I'm adding this a little bit late. This is actually after I recorded the initial video, but I forgot to include this. So we're going to add this in here. Basically, we need to incorporate logic to use our exceptional attack for our player 2 if we're using one input device. Remember to keep doing this whenever we add new inputs for our players to use, and we want to use one input device like a keyboard or arcade stick. Basically, go into your code, go ahead and go to your functions where we have all of our player 2 keyboard attack 1 through 4, add a new one, blueprint callable, void P2 keyboard exceptional attack. It's in your header file. Then if you go in your C++ file, just go ahead and write this function out and just call start exceptional attack. Then, when we're in our character BP, and this should be your base character BP, go ahead and look for your input action for your player 2's exceptional attack. Right here. Grab your player 2 reference, check if it's valid, and then call your function that we just made. And this is the exact same way that I do all the attacks for player 2 and all the inputs on keyboard. for multiple players. But I wanted to show you that. When we go into it, we're going to go ahead and go attack our guy. Make sure he gets quite a bit of super meter. And then when he goes to attack us, he should be able to press his input on the keyboard along with his attack to use his super meter. And you can see he can. So there you go, guys. That's how you can do super meter, combo gauge, functionality, gaining and reducing super meter amounts in your Unreal fighting game. In the next episode, we'll be going over how to chunk the bar so you can see exactly how much you need to be able to perform a move, things like that, and also going over actually adding X moves and exceptional moves in. That way you can see something more than just this regular attack. Alright guys, I'm Shawnthebro. If this video helped you, please subscribe. It helps me more than anything else you can do for the channel, and it just lets me know I was doing a good job and helping you out with this tutorial. If you did have any issues, feel free to join the Discord. I can't put it in an iCard, but you can look in the description. It's under Discord. If you join that, we have plenty of people who are more than willing and happy to help you, myself included. Be able to send pictures and videos to get any issues you had sorted out with this tutorial or any of my tutorials. Lastly, guys, if you want to come support us on Twitch, twitch.tv/Shawnthebro27, you can come watch me fail at Dark Souls 2 against the Pursuer, where I had to ballista him. Well, I had to spend about an hour trying to ballista him. Or you can come check us out for Resident Evil Friday, where I'm playing Resident Evil 4 for the first time, and it is a gem. Anyway, guys, again, I'm Shawnthebro, and I will see you in the next one. Bye, everyone.